I want to go through some of your co-stars, and if you could just describe them, maybe something that people don't know or misconceptions, but really describe, get an idea of what talents they brought to the table. Of course, Marion Ross.
Well, she's a rare one. If I had to name actresses that I've enjoyed working with in my entire life, I think she would be in the top three. Thank God, from the time the show went off the air, she was involved in some wonderful, wonderful work. And so that there is a lot of great recognition for her ability. She's a happy person now. There's another case of a woman that raised two kids all by herself and, wasn't the biggest actress in the world until that show came. She'd done some work, but that made her a star. She's just wonderful.
Since Ron Howard had another very successful show, Andy Griffith Show, how did he? What did he bring to the show that was different than the rest of the young actors?
Well, experience. Henry had done maybe one or two television shows. Anson maybe one. I don't know whether Donnie Most had done any. And he'd been in front of the camera since he was this big. It was second nature to him. Ron Howard is a very rare individual in this business. Great parents. Great parents who knew exactly how to raise him. He just lost his mother. And we went to a memorial. And it was just the most beautiful thing you could imagine, because it was a celebration. And that's the way he and his brother were raised by these people. Just wonderful. And his mother was an actress at one time. His father's an actor and a writer. It's all there. But he was Mr. Regular Kid. He went to public high school. He married his childhood sweetheart. I mean, he was the storybook that you don't find in L.A. He's the storybook you find in Keokuk, Iowa. You know what I mean? And he just permeated never flaunted his position. We were all equals on the show.
I want to keep going down the cast. Erin Moran.
Erin, she wasn't in the pilot. They didn't like the girl, and they brought Erin in, and she was wonderful. She was perfect. But as Erin grew up, there were a lot of problems in her personal life and with her family. And it's hard to say what the accumulation of all of this did to her, but she really got sick, I think. She also had a bad marriage. And she sort of disappeared from the scene. There was an article that was purported to have been written by her in one of the magazines, one of the Star or whatever those terrible things are, in which she made certain assertions and accusations that none of us ever believed a word of it. When we did a return to Happy Days, if you want to call it that, which was about not too long after we were off the air, maybe 5 or 6 years, and she wouldn't appear. And all we said all during the thing is, Erin, we would look right in the camera and said, "We're sorry you're not here, sweetheart. We miss you very much," and this and that. You know. When Nick at Night put our show back on the air, Marion and I and Erin went to New York for some press and a party. And Pat Morita, I think, was there. And this was a wonderfully different gal. This was a gal that grew out of all the problems. Happily married, to a wonderful guy. We flew back together on the plane, sat next to each other, and she had a Bible in her hand almost the entire trip and was reading from it. And I would kid her and say, you know, they haven't cast all the parts in that yet. So. And she got her life straightened out, and she's slowly trying to get back into acting, but it doesn't mean as much to her as she thought it did when she was a kid, because kids get bulldozed into it sometimes, which Ron Howard never had to worry about. He never got pushed into it. And Ron knew before we ever started Happy Days that he wanted to be a director. He just knew that.
Was it that evident on the set of Happy Days?
Oh, well, sure. Well, he was going to USC at the time. And then when our schedule got so busy, he switched over to a school out in the valley, just took less courses. But if you couldn't find Ron on the set when he wasn't working, you'd find him on somebody else's set watching the director or in the editing rooms. That's what he wanted.
Henry Winkler. You mentioned him earlier. Describe Henry as an actor and for that role.
Henry was perfect for that role. I mean, if you had interviewed Henry Winkler with his background, you probably would have never even considered him for that role. Highly educated, comes from a good family, European background, went to Yale. Henry used to say that when he was a kid in New York, he'd come over after school into Central Park where the Broadway shows had a softball league. He said, I used to see you play softball there all the time. Henry is dedicated, hardworking, always faced whatever challenge came, handled his success really wonderfully well, and is an extremely charitable person. He got married during the show and raised a stepson and then had a couple of children of his own. And I think the wisest thing that he did when we were finished was he laid off acting for a while and went into production and went into directing. He had a deal either with ABC or with Paramount, I don't know. And he's still doing those things. And he'll act, I believe he's on Broadway now, or soon to be on Broadway, in the Neil Simon play, which they tried out here. And very involved with kids. He's works very hard with McLaren Hall, which is handles kids that are disturbed and had problems with the law. So, you know, what more can you say?
Were there ever discussions about the Fonz being, since he in essence was the kind of like the dark side of that show, potentially, was there discussions about how far to bring that character, or was that not even a...
I don't think so. I mean, he did some great things in controlling his own limits as to what he felt the character could do. He's an anti-hero. And he never hurt anybody. The character Fonzie never hit anybody. And, you know, in a way, there was a moral to every situation that when the show really involved his problem or whatever he was in totally, there was always a moral to it. It had to come out right. You know? And he's very much that kind of a person.